I am Ejiro Umukoro. Everyone calls me Lady E. That's my brand. It's stuck with me over the years.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
I think it also comes from the fact that it's an ancestral royal name from my maternal grandfather. So yes, that also explains why the title comes with it. I'm an investigative journalist, a media executive, a consultant, a mentor, trainer, navigated the spaces of using media in particular to generate and inspire political conversations in the non-traditional way, engage civic participation, increase civic intelligence within the spaces I occupy. And over the years, I've been privileged to serve in multiple capacities. So really, I'm a woman who has, I wear them very distinctively, even though I have to even run them as concurrent.
All right, thank you so much for that, Lady E. Lady E, that is very important as a name to start with. It sounds very interesting in my ear. All right, Lady E, you're going to help me understand it because here in this podcast, we proud it a lot to know where we are coming from because we are interested in that. Okay, the reason behind it is that it's a podcast that is centered around African and African diaspora. And for the fact that a lot of people in the diaspora sometimes do not have a good track of where they are coming from, of course, you understand what I mean, maybe because of the slavery and all that, they don't really know exactly where they are coming from. So this deliberate attempt to talk about where we are coming from is an intentional choice of ours. So tell us a little bit of your history.
Okay. So I was born in Western Nigeria. More or less, I drank the first water from the Yoruba land. And so my first language, Ejiro. Is that the only one you remember?
That's the only one.
I think I beg. So you know Ejiro means I beg, right? So that's the So that's our English version of please as it is. Okay. So that was my first language. That was the first water I drank, the first air I breathed in the international hospital then, where you had the missionaries who came to Nigeria at the time, and they were just caring for us. So when my mom even gave birth to me, because of my complexion, it was so like the missionaries. A lot of people did not feel my mom gave birth to me. In fact, the entire hospital went into bonkers. They were like, no, she couldn't have come up from this woman. And the reason was because my father was not present at the time my mother gave birth, right? So when he finally arrived and they saw him, people now calmed down a bit. They now looked at my face, looked at my dad's complexion, and they said, okay, he must be the dad. that can explain it. Because my ancestral mother was an extremely fair woman. She was almost described as white. In fact, she got the title Oyibo. And when they blended that name Oyibo with my other maternal grandfather's royal family, they gave me that title, Omoto Oyibo D. So that's where even the name Lady E came from. The title name Lady E actually comes from. So at the end of the day, my birth was a sensation. It was a sensation. And even just growing up in the spaces I grew up, my parents could not help themselves. Remember that by the time I was already 9 months, I'd already started walking. My teeth were complete, according to the story I was given. So it was more like I was a child in a hurry to be formed, to grow up and to conquer. And I can see all of that energy in every single thing I have continuously done till date. In fact, many people describe me as someone who has energy. The first time I enter a place, when I choose not to be my other self, which is a very quiet, laid back, very shy sometimes person, although you would doubt that I can be shy, you would actually feel the energy when I step into a place. People say when you come into a place, you light up the place. And that's why even the name Lightere, which is also a name I go by, also comes to there.
That's fascinating. Your story is fascinating. I want us to talk a little bit about that. So first, you are from a royal family.
So here is this. In the Isokorobo land, from the Uzoro, I have the 6 ruling houses. My maternal great-grandfather, mother, right, was married to one of the royal houses. And when time came to be over the years, the story I gathered was my paternal grandfather was not interested that is great-grandfather later on was not interested in being part of that royal dynasty and conversations. So that's my story, really. And that's the connection I have with the place as it is.
That's interesting. That's very interesting now. The story behind you is very powerful. But anyway, that one can be for another conversation. Now,
Yes.
Tell me about your adolescence. So you grew up in this place now in Western Nigeria. What kind of Nigeria did you see ahead of you, and what kind of Nigeria was around you that you were living with at the time?
Oh, the Nigeria I grew up with, if I'm to go by the home I also grew up in, was a home where I was surrounded by books, music, lots and lots of trees, to a very large extent, except when you have to navigate some other spaces. That was in Nigeria. Even though the roads were untarred, they were not riddled with potholes as we see them today. I sand as grainy sand looked like, And then I eventually, sometime later, we left that part of Nigeria, went to Lagos. Lagos became a city. But the one thing about Lagos was the bustling speed, the hustle, the madness of trying to catch a cab or a bus or trying to meet up an appointment. I never liked it. I had the opportunity of growing up in 2 different kind of worlds. At the time, it was a life of wealth, of comfort, and enjoyment. And then at one point in time in our lives, it became a life of extreme poverty. So that was because when in 19, what year was this now? When there was this transition program in the late 80s to early 90s, it became apparent that many businesses at that time, there was a program, there was a law created at the time by the then ruling president, and all the middle class families who had businesses terribly affected by that singular law. So the businesses. My father happened to be among those who did. And from then on, it became a different story altogether. And I knew what it meant, what it feels like not to have food. I knew what it meant like to live in an environment where the roads became very bad due to autocratic government, due to bad leadership, due to disinterest by politicians in the lives of developing Nigeria as a country and uniting Nigeria as one. And that was why during the time Abiola became the first presidential candidate, that was not military in nature, it was a sign of relief for many persons. And we looked forward to the time when a technocrat, somebody who's an industrialist, because he was quite prominent in this era, would take over governance and know what it takes to rule the country. Unfortunately, that never happened. But growing up, mixing it all up, later things picked up in life. And then went to the university, lived the life I wanted to live, stayed off campus. And finally graduated. And today I am living my dream.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for that. I remember yesterday, the interview I was telling you was actually with the head of National Orientation Agency in Edo State. So he was telling me how it was in his time that he got scholarship. Of course, a lot of people got scholarship at the time, so they actually had a very beautiful Nigeria of their time. Of course, few years into the independence of the country now. But the Nigeria of today, as we see, is actually quite scary to say the least. But this is also the only home that we have. So we must all look for a way that we can shoulder the responsibility of making the country in a way that it can function for us, because we don't have anyone that is coming to do it for us. We are the one that will do it. It is hard. It's a very tedious job, but we are going to do it. So first, I want to thank you for the time and also for your sharing and the experience.
This is the first time I'm sharing my private experience like this. I've never done an interview where I granted this.
Thank you. I'm very honored for that privilege. Thank you for that. All right. Now, do you want to tell me how you got into journalism, into investigative journalism? I'm interested in that.
Oh wow! Now that is a big story. So growing up in growing up in Nigeria and growing up in the family and community I grew up at the time, journalism, the media as a whole, was something highly frowned upon for enter. In fact, the typical language was gentlemen of the press. In here, ladies and gentlemen of the press. That's to show you that it was a male-dominated business space and environment as well. But that didn't mean that there were not one or two outstanding women who were there. I mean, the Mesa were there, Orwell Brown was there, and so many other Nigerian women were also there doing their stuff and being good at what they do. But that didn't mean it was okay for every young Nigerian child who was a female to dream to become a newscaster and we automatically get their parents' and community's blessings. I didn't get that blessing. So it was an uphill task. It was frowned against. I was told that the only female who ever ventured into that space were termed prostitutes, which, by the way, is really an insult about it. I mean, even the word and that word these days is not even allowed to be used anymore because it's an insult to the identity to be defined by that term. But that was the perception back in my own early years growing up. I remember I had to hide doing a lot of things that were created to the creatives. I was a highly creative child. I was very good with paint drawing. I was good with writing. I was good with doing so many stuff in the creative industry spaces. Public speaking was my thing. In fact, by the time I was 14, I did my first public speaking gig where I was paid a humongous amount and I was to be the person who emceed or compare a wedding ceremony with people in attendance at 14 years. I remember trying to go into that space, how I had to convince my parents to allow me to do it. And that was understandable at the time, but nobody wanted to go into the media space. It was frowned upon. And so there was an uphill task there. And I had to hide a lot of things that I was doing. Even my first published book, I first published my first mini story when I was 13. It was self-published. I hid that book for so many years that nobody knew about it. The day it was found out, my father was shocked that I was a writer. I could even write poetry. But even then, it wasn't something that everyone encouraged me to do and said this was what you were meant to do. In fact, I was told you got to read medicine because you are naturally disposed to anything medical, you're interested in the sciences, you will do well. So forget about going to the art or the commercial department, just go straight to science. And so I went into science because I also love everything scientific. But the other love of me for media, for art, was also equally strong. Unfortunately, my health at the time would not allow me to cope with the rigor in the medical sciences. So I ended up being given the choice to choose to go into the life sciences. And so I made that choice to read one of the life sciences courses. And it was done. I had a bit of into environmental, and then went into my estate. I mean, my community. That is where my father hailed from, in Olomo, in Isoko land, to try to see how I can address the environmental issues regarding oil spillage that was so prevalent in Niger Delta from oil multinationals at the time. And I was so worried that all the land were being destroyed because of oil and pollution. And so I felt doing that would be a good opportunity to make a difference. And so I went into that, used Bryophyllum pinnatum as one of my plants to see how we can absorb oil spills in that region in Olomoro. Wow, I just noticed that as much as I love that aspect of it, it wasn't my thing. So I did the unthinkable. And my NYSC call-up letter was given me. What I wanted to do was run away from Lagos. I did not want anything to do with Lagos. Took up my call-up and I went off to the Northeast Zone in Gombe, where I had to serve. In serving in Northeast Gombe, I got the privilege of working with Voice of Nigeria. The offer was given to me at the time. And after having that offer, because I also had health issues too that I was battling with, I was now transferred to Lagos. But here's the trick, what happened. Here's the interesting thing that happened. Even though I was directed, or what's that proper word for it now, where they asked me to go back to Lagos and go start a banking job in Lagos, which my parents were so keen that I take on up. Like that, I never wanted to go back again. So I got to Lagos and did my redeployment again to Gombe. That is where my journey into media began. I was so fascinated with the capacity that I was given to produce independently youth programs, women programs, and even train young people. When I started that, I knew this was at the core of my essence. So I began to write, I began to be a reporter, I wrote so many stories, covered events, and when I was done, I never wanted to go back to Lagos. And I knew my folks were so upset that I made that decision. And then I changed direction, and straight up, I traveled to Port Harcourt the moment I was done. Got to Port Harcourt, no job, nothing. And yeah, it was for the first 3 months, there was nothing to eat. I could barely survive. And then somewhere along the line, someone who I had already told that I love the media, I had met in Port Harcourt, and I said, you know what? There's a radio station about to open. They just started a test transmission and they've been announcing that they want people who they recruit. What if you go there and join them? One for the interview, maybe you might get it, who knows? Because the way you've been talking about your past experience in the media, you never shut up. And you're a chatterbox, you should be on radio. And so I went for the interview. Incidentally, it was Voice of Nigeria. And I got there. Before this time, I didn't know, it was after I was accepted that I was told that over 350 persons had come in for the interview. So when I got there, I introduced myself. They told me, you're going to go straight up for a live test audio recording. Not for the live test transmission though, but it's on the spot test. If I present very well, then I'm going to get it. Take note, Voice of Nigeria style was not where I had the chance to be as free compared to Radio Nigeria style. There's a slight difference, and especially when it's like a commercial radio station. So there's a difference in how things are done. And I never done it that way because this was freestyle. This was, everything has to be, off the cuff. And so right there, I did it. And on that spot, I was given the job. And that was later I got to know that 350 people have participated for the interview. They hadn't gotten anyone, and I got the job. Dancing, literally. And so I got the job, and I began my journey in the second phase. And that's how I got into the media full time, and I got into the phase of developing young media entrepreneurs in entertainment, in the arts, you name it. That's where my journey began, to Radio Nigeria. That is Treasure FM. That's Treasure 89.1 FM in Port Harcourt.
That's lovely. And that's powerful also. And talking of Port Harcourt and having a kind of a reread of your story, it is impossible as a Nigerian not to remember another name in Port Harcourt. This time I'm talking of Kensaro Wiwa. Also because you did make mention of course, we are going to talk about that, investigative journalism and journalism as it were. So when you were in Port Harcourt, did you by chance have a kind of anyway, I didn't ask you the time because Kensaro will be killed on the 10th of November 1995. I don't
Correct. He
know
was
if
already
that was
gone.
it. Okay,
No, he
it
was
was
already
already
gone.
gone then.
Yes.
Okay, because you also made mention of environmental something. Is there any
Yes.
way that what did you learn about Kensaro Wewa because you were in Port Harcourt anyway? So tell me about that.
So Ken Saro-Wiwa's death, to a very large extent, spurred my decision, as a matter of fact, to see how I can save the Niger Delta from the oil spillage. That's the truth. So, and when I saw what happened to the Ogoni land, I was disturbed that the federal government can be that insensitive. I'm also disturbed that even to some extent, the community leaders may have been complicit in the way things have turned out. Not to mention the fact that the oil companies, the multinationals themselves, were not holding themselves to a higher standard of operations. But then again, you look at the joint Nigerian venture with the oil company, the NNPC, as well as the oil multinational. There's a joint venture they have. The sharing formula, the definition of the responsibilities that each of these persons play, their roles and expectations to the communities, clearly defined. In fact, if you look at the agreement in the setting up of that venture, it became clear that the oil multinationals do not owe the communities, that is the host communities, any of those social responsibility agenda. Don't. So how did the federal government sign such a venture agreement to that point still beats my imagination, which has finally led to what we have today as the PI bill, the Petroleum Industry Bill, that became an act last year in 2020. That was because the host communities were not regarded. Whereas the best practice, even overseas for multinationals, as we all know, is that you actually make an impact in communities. The opportunities for community development was supposed to be ensured. We've also seen where the community leaders in the hierarchy of the royal fathers, the chiefs, and all of those other important personages had a sharing formula where monies are given to them rather than develop the community. And I'm not just talking about the Ogoni land now. I'm talking about the general Niger Delta crisis with regards to the crude. You see where some of these top personages who are supposed to make impact and defend their communities, take these monies, they clean their mouth, like we say in Nigeria, and pretend as if money never got into their hand to help develop their communities. So even if the oil multinationals in some instances couldn't build schools, things were provided to build the schools and given to the community heads. But what happened? It became share the money. It wasn't about let's develop our land. So in the end, the oil spillages in the Niger Delta was a crisis of the cry for help, that there is been a lot of sabotage within and amongst everyone involved in ensuring that the spillages, the pollution, the gas flaring that we constantly see even till date that ought to have been stopped if there was a political will for the federal government and even the state governors. It's still what it is today, despite how many years of fight that has gone into this. Even with the recent judgment from the court that the Ogoni land should be cleaned up, nothing has been done to date with the speed it deserved to be given.
And that is quite sad. That is the situation of Nigeria. And looking at what is happening in the country, of course, not only in Nigeria, probably maybe I don't know whether to say whether it is worse in Nigeria. Maybe we are not yet got into the darkest part of our history. In that the people are not regarded. These multinationals are very powerful. They are extremely powerful. We can say what they do in other parts of the world, but who is going to hold them accountable in the country, in Nigeria, if the Nigeria government become fully complicit, become fully in collaboration of their criminal enterprise? Who is going to defend the local people? Have anyone sort of... Okay, please go.
I don't think it's about who is going to defend the people. The multinationals are actually only as powerful as any government in any country gives them the permission to be. In countries where corruption are the highest, that's where you see multinational oil companies abuse at its peak. In a country where there are kickbacks being given, see what I just said earlier. Imagine monies are given to your communities to develop it. As a chief in your community, or a royal father in your community, or a head of something in your community as a head or a representative, even at the state assemblies, the national assemblies, you see representatives of these persons who are given money to be silent about the abuses that go on. So in the end, it comes back to the people in terms of how we politically engage governance. It's why I've always been an advocate. I'm actually the pioneer of civic intelligence in Nigeria. And I've been an advocate of civic engagement and civic intelligence in Nigeria simply because I understand that it is the citizens who will make the government sit up. Once the citizens understand that the government they put in place or are put in place through electoral processes, that is because the citizens nominated them to be there via votes. And if that is the case, then it means that they cannot allow them go unpunished as it is. For a long time, Nigerians have been very apathetic toward governance. They have been disconnected from governance. They did not understand the power they have and their role in ensuring that things are done the proper way. Many years, Nigerians did not vote. And so the thoughts and those with thug mentality came into the governance space, majority of them that is. And what has happened? They've hijacked the process and then they bastardized the process. So that due process, which used to be a way of life in Nigeria, is no longer what it is. So we've had a situation where there's been no political will, and the lack of it is simply because people also are complicit. So what you have in totality are, one, a citizenry that does not understand their power, a citizenry that will not use their power, a citizenry that has high tolerance for suffering, a citizenry who will use religion, tradition, and culture to excuse evil even in their midst. Now, when the citizenry are like that, they develop a culture where those in positions of higher responsibility can actually be excused from doing what they should do. It's happening in Nigeria now, which is a good thing. We're beginning to see a rise in civic consciousness, a rise in civic engagement, a rise in interest in the politics of governance by the citizen, which means they are saying that through our votes now, we're going to select the individuals, not the parties who will come and save Nigeria, who work together with, and we will all be held accountable to save Nigeria. I continue at this moment, I can guarantee you that all of this conversation about who will save the country will happen because the people are now interested to save both themselves and the country, Nigeria.
All right, that's beautiful. I'm going to come to civic intelligence later on because that is so important, particularly as we are moving towards the 2023 election. But just before we get to the civic responsibility and some other questions that are just sort of pumping up in my head, is there a way to actually hold the Nigerian ruling elite responsible? I mean, a way for the Nigerian people to hold their ruling elite responsible? Because I tend to look at it as a mathematical formula that the reason that those at the center are powerful is because those who are in the periphery, the Nigerian people, if you want to call it like that, have given part of their power to them. And that is what democracy really is, in that everybody cannot be in Aso Rock. So they have delegated part of their power to them. If that is the case, it means those in the position of authority are actually employees. They are supposed to work for the people. So the people need to know that these guys are working for them. Because if you don't know that the worker, because the owner of the establishment where he's working, then the owner of the job can actually be disposed. So the question is, do we have a way as ordinary Nigerians to be able to monitor those who are representing us and hold them accountable for what they do or refuse to do?
Absolutely, yes. Let us understand that power is what it is. And when you give somebody power, whoever you're giving the power to, you should be able to know that they either understand that the power is to be used for the overall, not for themselves. It's why we have had a situation where once they get into positions of responsibility, aka power, what happens is they now forget that that power is for the citizens. Because they are giving that power as a form of representation to take actions, to make decisions on behalf of the general populace. But when they get into that office, often than not, the power begins to intoxicate them and they suddenly see opportunities for themselves rather than for the people. So one of the things we can address going forward is that even from secondary, even from the crèche, right from crèche to primary to secondary and university, we need to start instilling in our young people that power is not something that you are given in which you now abuse. That they should be able to differentiate where their self-interest begins and where the service to the populace becomes operative. Their self-interest is their salary, their emoluments, and other advantages that come to them. But for the public, it's about using public monies, taxes, and other forms of funding in the name of the country to be run for the end for, and that there should be due process and accountability. When citizens understand that these persons are voted into power, they should also know that they have the power to recall them. It is why voting is important, because when you vote, your signature is captured in the data of the polling. Now, once your data is captured in the BVAC like we use now, it is not easy for a people within a community to rise as one voice, write a protest or a petition to INEC and say, you know what, this representative is not doing right. We're going to recall this representative. And what happens? As soon as that is done, INEC will now start off, it's kicked off by INEC, it goes live, and then people cannot come together. The same energy we use in coming together to vote is the same energy and determination that is required to recall someone. Different forms of protest, and consistent protest is another way to say, you know what, we don't like your kind of leadership. Out you go. You can also write public petitions. You can also write open letters. You can also create a collection of lawyers who can do the job of checking government as pro bonus. You can also have the CSOs. The CSOs in Nigeria are beginning to be active, but we need them to do much more than what they currently do. Because the CSOs will help check a lot of the excesses, even from government, the political government. Also, the media has a critical role in ensuring that, one, they not only give the people the right information, but they also are dishing out proper, powerful knowledge data that we equip the citizenry to make informed decisions, such that their political agendas are not driven by biases, but are really consciously driven by the realities of ground and speaking truth to power every single time they get, and even make it a standard of operation. So there's quite a lot we can do. And it begins with the voting. Voting candidates, have the capacity, potential, and will be able to exercise the political will when the time comes. The last set of persons they have seen so far have been repetitive in cycle. A few are outstanding. The majority are not. So Nigerians should come to a point where they should be really involved. They cannot sit on the fence. They cannot be detached. They cannot say, it no concern me. They cannot say, it's none of my business. They cannot say, my vote does not count, because that is a political propaganda that was sold to them. They are now repeating it and buying it into it consciously and denying themselves their civic duty to go out and vote. Then, wherever you live in your society, even the civil service as a whole needs to be revamped. The entire civil service structure, the entire civil service laws and policies needs to be updated. A situation where a public servant commits a crime and he simply reposted to another office rather than sacked immediately as an example to others, that has got to stop. The civil service should not be a place where people feel they can go in, sign out, and go and continue with their other businesses at the hour, at the expense of doing what is for the public good. because it's taxpayers' money that I use to pay them. So then what I'm saying is that we have a systemic problem which needs a systemic cure for it to really change itself. And it begins with the re-engineering of the Nigerian mind towards civic engagement, political participation, civic mobilization, and really, really being aware of how we can merge CSOs, media, and the communities in holding government more accountable. The moment they know that they misbehave in office, they will be booted out. I can assure you, politicians will sit up.
All right. We're waiting for that time. That is when it will actually be functioning in the country. Now, another thing I'm sort of curious about is to understand what is your main area of concentration in your investigative journalism. I want us to take us to your work.
Essentially, what I do is if I see a problem in the society, I just take on. If I see, for example, like what I did, which was recognized by the Pulitzer Center in the USA, for which I was also interviewed by the Wisconsin University Africa at noon, was the issue when I discovered during COVID-19 that we're also having another kind of pandemic inside a pandemic. And what was that pandemic? It was gender-based violence. I began to notice that there were instances where young children were being molested, abused physically, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and in every other way you can think of, even malnourished and maltreatment and all of that. I also had incidences of many women hiding and running away from their homes, their marital homes, that is, or even in the relationship, so that they can be protected from their abusers. Now, what the pandemic did was, because it boxed everybody in a particular area, emotions got high. And so if the abuse that usually existed prior to the time was maybe one slap a day, it now became several floggings a day. In a way, the people felt they were imprisoned by their abusers. So when I noticed this incident, I felt, what is going on? I'm like, what's going on here? And that was what led me to begin to dig into the issue of gender-based violence within my environment. So I started from Warri, when I first heard the first instance. Then I extrapolated it to Asaba in Delta State. Then I went to Delta State as an entirety, before to Edo, to Calabar, to Akwa Ibom, to Bayelsa. I was going places. The next thing, it escalated. I was going to places like South Africa when it became such a big deal, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and even in Sweden. I mean, it was that massive. That was how far my investigative work into gender-based violence and children abuse took me to. And when I uncovered all of that, and I uncovered the issue of rape among young people, it all combined among the very strong voices that got the federal government to pass an emergency bill regarding rape cases in Nigeria. So rape case was declared an emergency in Nigeria, and we were able to see to it the gender equality bill with regards to this specific area of gender-based violence and abuse and rape in universities became a law. And today we're all reaping the benefit. In Delta State, for example, because of my investigation, the VAP Act, which is the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, the bill that was sitting in the House of Assembly was passed. This after I was on a public event, an international public event, calling out and speaking truth to power to call out the Delta State government to do the needful and get this done appropriately. And so it was passed. So when I see a problem, I delve into it. It could be, for example, the incidents of train ticket racketeering in Nigeria. I just followed up on the story and I exposed how this racketeering takes place. It could also be bad road Nigeria. What is it in Nigeria? So my investigative journalism is really nice that the attention of government so that action can be taken and justice can be gotten.
Thank you for that. That of the COVID-19 situation was particularly challenging. I remember I did a number of interviews in Nigeria of some people where everybody, of course, is locked down and the government didn't supply what they said they were going to supply. Of course, video later show up of the food actually locked in a place nobody kept. Is sometimes in my place, they say when you open your mouth and pull the corn inside, you need to close your mouth, otherwise the corn are going to fall out. it's quite funny sometimes.
True, true.
How simple is your work as an investigative journalist in Nigeria?
I don't use the word simple. I think the nature of investigative journalism, which many people are not into, by the way, let's even make it down. Investigative journalism is from your beat reporting, which is the daily reporting of just everyday things you see around, which could also sometimes include breaking news sometimes. These are just regular news reporting. But for investigative journalism, the nature of it is very demanding. It's in depth, the scale can be very wide, and the depth of it can be something that can ask you emotionally, materially, physically, financially, and in many other ways as well. So it's not a job many Nigerian media practitioners like to go into because it takes a lot. Sometimes you risk your life just to get a story and expose it. So it's not your everyday cup of tea kind of journalism.
And because we are talking of a country that we need to build, because we don't have anyone coming to do it for us, of course, we need the job within the hand of everybody on deck to do the job, and particularly those who are also working on the ground to sort of help us straighten our road. In this sense, I want you to speak to the importance of having investigative journalists and media creators, media content creator, to help shape the image of Nigeria.
I agree with you totally about creating the image that shapes Nigeria. I think we are getting to a point where we should know that the social media is a powerful space that when people Google you up or do search engine on you, your country, your people, your culture, your practices, your religion, your way of life, whatever we put out there is what people we see. And whatever trends the most too is also a projection, a reflection if we're not careful about the state of who we are. Seen incidences of people, let me give you an example, where people used to describe the Niger Delta as a no-go area. The illusion was so bad, the picture was so horrible that even people from Lagos used to feel the Niger Delta. And when they came, I thought that it wasn't as described it. So as media practitioners, as content creators, we want to be very deliberate and conscious about the things we put out there. We're not saying lie. We're saying, hey, must it always be evil? Must it always be bad? And even when you report the bad, there's a way you will tell the story. Because in all the world we live in, there's no country that is free from some certain levels of badness. But you begin to repetitively tell only bad stories. There's so much good to talk about. How can you, out of 100 stories, maybe 5 bad stories, you focus on the 5 and you only tell one good story? Out of the 95. No, we need to change our narratives. Even what we talk on social media too is very key. We want to be more uplifting in our messages. We want to be more inspiring because investors also look at those kinds of data and use them to make a judgment call with regards to, do I want to invest in this country or not? Even tourism businesses as a whole thrives because a place feels safe and is secure. And this also means that for us to speak truth to power, the federal government and state governors as well, they must sit up to their responsibility to make sure that their leadership is one that inspires Nigerians to also tell great stories, to put out good stuff out there. Because you can only give what you have sometimes. And when you're in a state of dissolution, hopelessness, defeat, hunger, starvation, it will come to a point where you know that the only thing you want to talk about is to spew your anger. That's what we've been seeing. And so the onus too goes back to the leadership in Nigeria that it's their failure to do what is right based on the monies they've gotten over the years and the monies they keep borrowing. Nigeria want.
All right. I want us to go a little bit to the Niger Delta. So what is the situation today? That is important for us because not just because that is where the money actually is coming from our mono economy, no? Anyway, the Niger Delta, that is where they hung Kensaro Wiwa, who was fighting for the respect of not just the people but also the land. Has something changed in Niger Delta today? What is the situation in Niger Delta from your point of view?
So let me also quickly correct an impression. I think it's a propaganda to keep saying Nigeria is a mono economy. Let me break it down for you. We have so many rice farms and rice crushing, what do you call them now? What do you call the, okay, so let me put it this way. You have so many rice farms and rice companies in Nigeria where so much is being made. In fact, as we speak now, the cost of a bag of local rice is at par with the cost of rice of foreign imported rice. We have so many rice farms all over Nigeria that money in the GDP alone, based on the statistics I read somewhere, I wish I have it to hand, I would give you the data. The data shows that there are other economies in Nigeria, especially amongst even the creative industry, like in entertainment alone. The GDP from entertainment is insane. But because you don't have a proper due process of how the monetization occurs, of the value chain and the entire ecosystem in a structured manner, so much of that money is just dissipating. The same thing with the rice farms. The same thing with the fish farms. The same thing with, you talk about packaging products from Nigeria outside Nigeria. This is an understated story that we don't tell, which is back to that earlier question you talk about content creators and the role of media and governments. We have so much sold ourselves the narrative that we're a mono economy country that we forget that there are other economies in Nigeria, other sectors in Nigeria that are doing really good, but we're not telling the stories of that good in that. The success in terms of the GDP that we have. So I believe that we need to rechange our lenses of how we see Nigeria. We know that for a long time, oil has been the primary focus. It didn't mean that other economies did not exist or aren't existing. Like you said, we had the granite pyramids. We also had the yam, the period when yam was being sold like gold. I mean, sold like water availability and all of that and all of that. The energy sector is a place where, if you look at it, petrochemical products is an offshoot of the oil sector. That oil, as it is, the crude oil, if you break down the many various value chain in the oil sector, you'll be shocked that crude oil is just one of the items. We import so many petrochemical products out of Nigeria. We do. The industries, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, is also there to be doing magic, but we're not seeing them tap into that as it should. So all this exists currently. It's not as if they're not there. It's not as if the certain reasonable structure of them are not there. Innocent Motors is doing fantastically well. The Aba market, where you have the shoemakers and all of those cobblers, they're also there. They're importing quite a lot overseas as well, and not just within Europe, also in other African countries as well. So what I'm saying is we need to change the narrative as if things haven't moved away from the other perception we used to have. Things have moved. Right from the Obasanjo era till date, things have moved, but we have not talked much about them and focused our light on them.
Thank you for the clarification. Now, let's go back to the second part of the question, the situation of the Niger Delta today. What do you have to say about that?
I said that Niger Delta is a peaceful place to be. Life is good in many areas. We just need better governance. That's what we need. We need governors who are interested in the people and in the development of the places, and not governors who are interested in becoming an extension of themselves as emperors and using their own strategies to impose on the general masses. Overall, there's high potential for development, really. There are a number of Niger Delta people who are doing phenomenally well, even though the majority can be in a better place. But I know that that's why I'm always calling out for the citizens to be more engaged in civic participation in terms of political engagement. There's no other two way around it. And media is a tool that I have used to galvanize and inspire and create behavioral social change in people. And I know how powerful that is. And once you help people understand that they have the power, they can take ownership and begin to take action.
Now, looking back at you, who started your journalistic journey, is there somebody that, because I remember you did mention of the fact that at the time, actually one of the reasons maybe that made you to get started or have interest in journalism was because there was lack of representation of women in the journalistic world. I want to believe that. So who were your kind of reference at the time you started to build your grant on it?
I won't say I had any reference per se. I just had a hunger and fire inside of me to do the thing that I have been gifted to do. Because I kept noticing that every time I applied for other jobs, they never came to me, even when I did so well in the tests or interviews most of the time. Somehow they never came to me. But media was a job that I never, ever, ever applied for per se. I just walk in and I get the job. There's never a long set of interviews to conduct. I just get it. The instant I step into that space and say, I would like to do this, and we have that conversation, I get the job instantly. So I realized that this is what I was meant to do. Whether people were already standing in the spaces that I admired and say, good job, well done, have yourself a niche. People like Oprah Winfrey to CNN or Opia, all these ladies were fantastic in their own capacity. And they were the ones who made us look at TV and say, wow, these women are good and you can be as good as that, even carve your own path and be very exceptional in your own space. So yeah, those were the people. And John Moore, for example, is another guy who I looked at back then like, oh, he knows his job. So for me, it was a mix of both male and female that were inspiring in the sense of, they are doing their thing, we too.
Now, would you say that journalism or doing journalism, maybe in general sense of it in Nigeria, is a difficult job? I mean, are there some challenges facing journalism in Nigeria?
There's quite a lot of challenges, as any other business will have challenges. But most of them, most importantly, I would say, is the constant government harassment of journalists. It has to stop. They cannot harass journalists. It's against the law. And they break the law when they do that. And there are consequences for breaking the law. We are the fourth estate. So the federal government, the state governors, and the apparatus, and those who work for them, their aides and special assistants, or whatever they choose to call themselves by the title they prefer any given day, on any given day that is, they should learn to respect the fourth estate. Because after the executive is the legislature, the judiciary, and the media. So by constitution, we are recognized by the constitution. So my message to all politicians and the political structure and the federal government and state government is you cannot harm a journalist. If you feel a journalist has done something wrong, there are legal processes and ways to go about it. You cannot use violence on journalists. It should stop. It's not done. Then we've seen situations where even the media space is now almost being dominated in terms of ownership by persons who are in politics, who are politicians in one way or the other. I'm not saying they shouldn't delve into the media, but because politicians are more dominant in these spaces, it kind of affects the quality of and professionalism, the output, and even the hiring of expertise in these spaces, which sometimes can water down the quality of the content, as we talk, quality of the professionalism in terms of how they deliver the job, and even in terms of the recruitment process, and even the internal policies and political agenda that drives the station. And then we've seen situations where lack of roads, lack of lights only increases the bill overhead that the musicians have to cope with. It's insane the amount you just require just to be able to start up a radio station. I have been privileged to start up a number of radio stations from scratch. And in doing so, serving as a pioneer in many capacities, I learned that the regulatory bodies too have a crucial role in how they help make sure they make it the ease of doing business in these spaces friendly, especially professionals who need space so that we can have a better media engagement, media narrative, media inclusiveness in the Nigerian system where we are. Aside from that, we also have to deal with remunerations. Those are important things. Situation where the media practitioners are devalued in terms of pay, not very encouraging. I think that there are no other outstanding stations who are paying regularly, but there are a number of stations who are also paying regularly. Time to time, they never owe their staff. We have good examples of those. So, see a situation will have more of those kinds of people doing that. I mentioned that all fire critical to the enabling of that. And then the universities need to churn out professionals. So the universities also need to work with well-seasoned professionals in that space. It's not academic lecturers. Academic lecturers do not offer the students anything. We now have practicing experienced journalists or media practitioners, broadcasters, in any capacity have served, even as media general managers and stuff like that. These are the kind of people they want to be employing in the education spaces, and then they go on to do further academic courses in addition to the experience and not the other. Yeah. So overall, I would say for me, my journey in the media has been a fascinating one. I have been very blessed. I have been a multi-award-winning media executive, journalist, broadcaster, anchor, and even a human capital development expert. I have trained over thousands of people, several thousands of persons in the Niger Delta in terms of the entertainment industry, in terms of media, the arts. I've seen many of them even gone on to become entrepreneurs in their own right. And I'm happy I've been able to be critical in adding value to that space. I mean, when you talk about that space, yes, I am somebody that can be mentioned and said she also added and made impact in that.
Now, in your own judgment, what makes a good journalism?
Good journalism really is driven by understanding that there's the ethics of journalism. That's the foundation, that's the basis. You cannot veer off the ethics of journalism for fairness, for truth, for speaking truth to power, for giving the right, accurate data, for being trustworthy, being somebody who is also able to drive a community agenda for the public masses and address issues in your area. The most powerful thing about good journalism is that you are making impact, and the impact is such that it's measurable. People can see that what you have done has created the difference for good. You are able to expose what is hidden. You are able to help the citizens gain their voices. There's supposed to be a platform where people should be able to use that platform to be good. So one of the key rules of journalism and a journalist is that you should be well researched. You should have the data at your fingertip. They must be as accurate as possible. The barest minimum and hit at. And when you know you've said something that is not right, you have to recount and make an apology for that, and actually rewrite the story if you have to, or follow up that story and say, look, and make sure that people are aware that that correction has been done. And that's why it's not about breaking the news first. It's about breaking accurate news first. And that's where the goal should really be. So any person who wants to be a journalist, you must be driven, you must have passion for the job, you must be somebody who enjoys data gathering. Your research must be deep. You must also have great interviewing skills. You must be one who is able to communicate very effectively. Your choice of words, your tone, your manner, all of that are all encompassing in making sure that you know what you're doing. And it's good to just understand that you cannot rest on your laurels. So it's not enough to say, I have a first degree in mass comm. No, it's about the experience. So you have to continuously expose yourself to different formats of the journalistic ecosystem, the spaces you have. So there's development journalism, there is investigative journalism, there's beat reporting, there's solutions journalism. There are various kinds of journalism in the many facets of it. So having a grasp of all of them, even data journalism is an interesting aspect. So you navigate the spaces and expose yourself. So you're a whole lot rounder than just being one thing in the space of journalism. Editing, writing speech, writing capacity, your proofreading, all things are very, very key as well. So that when you write out a good story, you inspire people to take action based on your story. And you must know that you have to curtail your biases, all of that biases. But as a journalist, you have got to reduce it to the barest minimum. You cannot allow your bias infiltrate or stain your investigative work or even the report that you put out there. Those, I would say, are some of the key things that are critical, even though there are others one can try and dig into particularly understand.
Thank you so much for that. That is really powerful. Now, I don't know if you want to touch a little bit on the civic intelligence and civic engagement, because we didn't make mention of it in sometime in the conversation. You want to say anything about that?
Wow, that's a good one. Civic intelligence is knowing that you, as a citizen, develop your citizen IQ. Just like you have an IQ, intelligence quotient, either you're born with it or sometimes people are raised in a manner that they actually increase their IQ. You also have what is called the emotional intelligence. It comes with being aware and being mindful of the environment. So you begin to detect patterns and isolate things like that and know that when you see this kind of pattern, this is the behavior to have. Same thing with adversity quotient. The same way when you fail at something, as it is, you learn from that experience. You don't say you are a failure. No, you don't tell yourself you're a failure. You simply learn and say, oh, that failed. And then you ask yourself, why did it fail? And then you're able to highlight key areas, key points or observations down and say, oh, this is what led to why this failed. And you take that knowledge, that data, and use it next time somewhere else. It's called adversity quotient, to be able to cope with adversity and failures and disappointments and all those kind of related issues, so that you can rise again and tackle things head on. The same thing with civic intelligence. Civic intelligence means that you know that political decisions have direct impact in your pockets, what you earn, the school you go to, the quality of life you live, whether you will marry or not, whether you will have children or not, whether you can take care of your mother, your grandmother or not, whether you can be useful in society or not, whether you can carry a community and say we want to donate and create a system where we can handle our problems or not. And once you understand that civic intelligence has to do with understanding the electoral processes in your country, how it works, what the law says, what you have as a right as a citizen, what is the right of the politician, what is the role of the regulatory bodies in the political process, what is the process itself in bringing in elective members of the society to be given power to make decisions about your life. And you know that you also have tools, mechanisms, processes, and means to also checkmate them through things like writing petitions, like carrying out protests, like recalling a sitting senator or House of Representative or state representative member, or even generating a situation whereby your House of Assembly members must now, by any means, because the media, you can use the media as your voice to voice out your anger, your pain, your disappointment, and even encourage a situation where there's a no vote of confidence that leads to the impeachment of a president. But you know all of this. You understand that your civic intelligence is about guiding and guarding your future as a Nigerian.
Is there a way that people can learn some of this civic responsibility? Because if you don't know, like we were saying before, about the power or the relationship between the leader and the lead, if the lead do not know that they have a role in the relationship that actually work there, you might think that, okay, it's only the politicians that decided everything, they are just doing everything, they are the ones that are corrupt. But like I've often said here in this podcast, it is not only the politicians that are corrupt. Even the Nigeria electorate are equally corrupt, because if they are not corrupt, it will be the politician will be afraid of the people if they are corrupt. But because they are not afraid of the people, meaning that everybody is the same in the same boat.
So here is the thing. Part of the civic intelligence is knowing that you should not sell your vote. It's just common sense. So civic intelligence, to a very large extent, borderlines on common sense thinking. What do I mean? You know that once you collect that money, even if it's 5,000, 10,000, or even 50,000 or 100,000, or even if it's a million, you know that money ends the day that money ends. And that money can end in a second, in a minute, in an hour, in a day, in a few weeks, or just a month. Now, once that money finishes, it will not last you to the next election cycle. Fact. Now, when you do a critical thinking, you would understand that, wait, I collect 1 million naira, 50 kobo, salt, pepper, now, and I know it will not even last me till the end of the year, let alone the cycle of the election or the tenure of that person. So you will now sit back and realize that if I take this money and I vote this person in, this person is no longer beholden to me. I have sold my birthright, like Nigerians know from the Bible. That is those who read the Bible. You've sold yourself for a pot of stew. The pot of stew has ended. What's next for you? But when they understand that the moment you don't collect money from them and you can go out and vote, you will know that you can never be tired or lazy or find excuses why you should not recall somebody who is not performing well. And it's the same principle that if you understand that the quality of the politicians we have today is also a reflection of the culture and the mind of the Nigerian space to some extent, that is why you see this kind of people come out, then you understand it. A situation where the so-called middle class people, I always say that a lot, that we, the middle class people, are part of the problem of Nigeria. What do I mean? We are the ones who do not go out to vote. Even though I vote, I still put myself in that space because I knew what it took for me to break the shackle of growing up in an environment, a society, a religious setting where you were not encouraged to go out and vote, where you did not see your parents go out and vote. Many of us, our parents never voted in their entire life. Maybe once in their entire life, if at all. Some persons, their parents never did, their uncles never did, their great aunts never even did, or uncle, as the case may be. So we have grown up in a society, in a culture where religion has superseded our civic intelligence, that we no longer think that civic duty is even part of being a good Christian or Muslim. So where that part in the Bible tells people to pay Caesar's things to Caesar, pay your taxes. Why can't you pay your, go and get your voters PVC and go out and vote? So when Nigerians understand that at this point where we are now, if you decide that your civic intelligence will be low, you get low leadership. If you decide that your civic intelligence will be high, you're going to also get high level of leadership. There is no two way about it. A very civic conscious society begets a highly proven leadership culture. It is that simple. So for example, in Australia, they know that if you don't go out to vote, they will fine you $20. For some people, they will say, what is $20? I beg, I'll receive fine. That is in a culture where value for voting is not highly placed. But in that culture, even though they can afford the $20, many of them prefer to go out and vote because they know that I can hold my person in power, that person I voted in power. Whether I voted him or not is not relevant. If my person gets into power, fine. If my person doesn't get into power, still fine. But what did I do? I exercised my vote. And I know that I will have the mouth, the voice to be able to call that person out if they are not performing. You understand that it is an entire process. An election is not that day's election of voting alone, but election is actually a continuous cycle from the day that you go out to get your register for your PVC, you collect your PVC, you vote that person, the person is in power, and governance continue. It never stops. It's a daily practice. So Nigerians must get to a point where they understand that You have to learn how to hold yourself accountable so that you can hold the president, the governor, the representatives, the councillors at the local government area accountable too. Because if you feel that you should be excused, then you will want to excuse the other man from not also being held accountable. It is that simple.
That's true. Absolutely true. All right. Now, where do you see the future of Nigeria with the work that you are doing within the area of civic intelligence and also in your journalism? Because you are educated people. You trust your education. What kind of Nigeria do you see in the future?
Oh, I see a Nigeria where people are becoming, for the first time, very civic conscious of the decision that they make. Nigerians are beginning to understand that at this point now, there is hunger in the land and it's biting everybody very hard. Nigerians are beginning to understand that if they can get a leader who gives them power alone, it will drive the economy of this country on so many levels with the speed of light. Nigerians also begin to understand that even though as a delegate I collected so and so money, I'm regretting not voting the person that should really do the job. There's a lot of regret following not with those conversations. I've had to interview some, and I could sense that they are beginning to understand that even after they collect the money, there's also a feeling of self-failure. There's some sense of guilt and shame that envelops them, even though they can see evidence of why they use the money for, and they use that as comfort. But it's not enough comfort because they know that that person that they have sold their soul spirit to, as it were, is not going to do them anything in the next 4 years once they get into power. Next 8 years, if they do 2 terms. And we're beginning to see a Nigeria that is beginning to be very, very in terms of self-mobilization, collaborative work, which is not a culture we used to have like before. And we used to work as a people together. That broke for many, many decades. But now I'm beginning to see that Nigerians are beginning to look teamwork, of collaboration, of having a vision and working towards that vision, come what may. We're beginning to see a Nigeria where they can speak truth to power. They will call the president by his name and say, you didn't do right. Before this time, they used to be very quiet, they only complain within their homes. And when they see people coming up, they shut up. Now these Nigerians are more vocal. Thank goodness we have social media, which has brought about a certain kind of revolution we've never seen before in giving out information. So for that, I know that we're going to get a better Nigeria. And then we're having the young millennials, right? The Gen Z generation and the Y generation who are more aware of their own rights. In fact, they have a better, strong sense of entitlement compared to the generation before them. They're beginning to own that civic space. I see a Nigeria where the civil society is waking up, from Yaga to Serap to other fantastic civil society groups, many of which I also collaborate with. EIE, enough is enough too. I've seen so many of them doing magical, extraordinary work, and the impact they have been making is outstanding. Yes, someone like Atado Peter, they work together with other groups. And in different ways, I'm seeing technocrats. Everybody coming in to try to create a difference. And I believe that this is where we should be headed to, where we galvanize the young people and where the young people know that the power belongs to them. And every single Nigerian, every child, I'm seeing where parents now are beginning to tell their children, who are we voting for? The children will now say the name of who they want to. That kind of civic consciousness at that crèche level, when they're just a few months old or can barely even speak good English, but can still say what they want to say. That moment when they see us participating and engaging, we are going to create the Nigeria we seek. And I pray that we continue at this momentum. We never give up because consistency is key and we have to maintain it till we get that which we want. Part of that conversation and part of that journey. And I'm beginning to see that soon we get a better Nigeria than the one we've known in the last 40 years.
Thank you so much for that. How can people connect with you? I don't know, maybe you have a book or books there that you are selling, you have courses, you have training program. Use this few seconds to advertise yourself.
Okay. Well, we do a lot of training program. I do a lot of mentoring. I have mentored thousands of young Nigerians from the young man who won the first West African Idol, Timi Dakolo, to the young man who produced one of Burna Boy's music that, as we all know, is now a Grammy Award winner, to the young man who started Mark Angel Comedy that now has a franchisee for Emanuela Comedy that you see from time to time. They broke the Google Internet for Africa on so many levels. So I have always done things like that. And currently, I still train people in media, in arts, in mentoring, and even into politics, those who want to be things like that. I also train them, and they can just connect with me on my phone number. That is +234 803 59 26901, or they connect with me on social media, Facebook and Twitter at Lady E Umukoro. Lady E Umukoro, that's UMUKORO. You just Google me on LinkedIn, Lady Ejiro Umukoro, and they're going to find me there. In fact, if you want to just check me out, just Google Lady Ejiro Umukoro, and you see so much about me will even come up as well. And they can just email at contactlightraymedia@gmail.com. That's my name of my company, lightraymedia at gmail. So that's contactlightraymedia@gmail.com.
That's powerful. Of course, for why you are Lady E, you already explained that. That is very important. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you in the next episode.